Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, Reno's housing market was one of the hardest hit during and after the recession. But now we're seeing a major resurgence in home buying and a huge increase in prices. In fact, July's median home price was the highest we've seen since before the bubble burst, and it shot up more than $40,000 just since January. Now, it's great news for sellers, but it is pricing a lot of people out of the market. Add to that new developments with largely middle to high income pricing, and some longtime residents may not be able to comfortably live in Reno anymore. Now, Mike Thornton, the executive director of Action, is here now to talk about an effort to change all this. Mike, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much, Ariana. We really appreciate being here this evening.
Now, this is a big issue. I know when we spoke before, it's described as this massive, multifaceted issue. How big of a problem is it at the stage we are now?
Well, I think the most important thing is with Reno being at the front end of a potential tsunami of development, we're really at an optimum stage to be able to start thinking about how we want that development to move forward so that it's smart, so it's socially equitable, and so it benefits the most people, most of the residents that it can in the city. So I think we're actually at a very exciting time.
What are some of the warning signs you've seen so far?
Well, I mean, I think one of the examples we saw very recently was what happened with the proposed standard, where you had a number of dilapidated houses, but for many people were the only houses that they could afford, the only apartments they could afford. They wound up being displaced because there was the proposal, which is still pending, to build a very high-end student housing complex. These people were pushed out, they had nowhere to go, and what we really hope to have happen and have the city take leadership in is making sure that that process doesn't get repeated and repeated over and over again. We have many very vulnerable people in the downtown core, and there's ways to do development that can really provide affordable housing along a whole range of income levels and do good development that will make for a very attractive city.
Okay, now, so your group, Action, is circulating a petition to try to change some policies. You want to tell me about that?
Well, specifically, what we've been asking the city to do is to put what we call community benefit policies into the development ordinances. And this is particularly related where subsidies and incentives are given to developers to do projects. And what we've done after a lot of research is make some pretty basic suggestions. One is that if subsidies are going to be given, if incentives are going to be given, that the developer says, well, we'll hire 60% of our workers from the local resident base. That they will buy, to the best of their ability, all of their materials and services from local businesses, that they pay appropriate wages, prevailing wage for development workers, project workers, living wage for permanent employees, and that also when there are apprenticeship and training programs, that those be certified, and we'd like to see them targeted at the highest unemployment areas of the city, the places where people have the lowest incomes, so that way they become ladders out of poverty and into good paying jobs.
So ensuring an adequate amount of affordable housing, what is an adequate amount to you?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And to me, an adequate amount would be that there is a sufficient stock of housing along a broad range of incomes that fit the needs of the people of the city. That's going to be, market rate housing. That's for very affluent residents, all the way down to low wage workers who work in many of the casinos. And then also, of course, we have elderly and disabled people who are on fixed incomes who also deserve to have a decent place to live that is convenient to the services that they need. So it's a broad range. And this is being done in communities all around the country, utilizing job housing fit metrics, inclusionary zoning, what they call economic integration, where you have neighborhoods where there is a broad range of housing choices. So this is not new. These things are being done all over the country and successfully in many places.
I guess what I'm curious about is how far we are from where we need to be in terms of having enough housing for those who need it. Where are we now?
Well, I think that, once again, I mean, I think that's a really good question. We have everybody gearing up for the so-called Tesla effect, where you have an unknown number of people who are going to be coming to the area just for that employer. And I think the idea that a lot of people have is, well, we want to attract more business and more employees. And so where are all those people going to live, plus making accommodations for the people who are already here? You know, it's not just Reno. Sparks is actually doing its master plan as well. And I happened to go to one of their presentations, and they said that one of their core values is equity in their master planning process. And that's the kind of thing that we'd like to see happening in Reno too, that there's a commitment to a core value of equity, of social equity. So we work as effectively as we can, public-private, nonprofit, community engagement, civic engagement. So we're addressing all of those issues and trying to do the best we can for the most number of people that we can.
Now, saying it is one thing, you know, saying that equity is part of your core values is one thing, but it is a tricky balancing act, I think, for any city, because you want to attract this new business, you want to eliminate blighted properties, old motels where people are living week by week. These are our lowest income residents.
Absolutely.
In order to clean up the downtown area and make it this vibrant downtown that they want, they have to get rid of that. So what's the balancing act that they do to satisfy what you're asking for and still accomplish that goal?
Well, I think probably the easiest way to say it is economic integration. And once again, what that really means is instead of having, say, for example, one neighborhood where it's nothing but high income housing and another neighborhood where it's nothing but lower income housing, what you do is you build mixed use developments that have housing available along that continuum of income levels. So what you wind up having is you wind up having economically integrated neighborhoods, people of different socioeconomic classes living in proximity to each other, which actually has been shown to create more sustainable economies, more vibrant neighborhoods, and more livable cities. So there's a lot of tools being used, one of them being inclusionary zoning, others, like I said, calling for job housing fit analysis to be part of a development project. So there's a lot of tools that can be used to achieve these economically integrated, thriving and vibrant neighborhoods. And like I said, it's happening across the country.
So would you advocate for the city council turning down a proposal that could bring a lot of development to, say, the downtown core if it didn't offer lower income housing?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think it's not really a matter of, you know, each and every project doing each and everything. I think it's more along the lines of how do we look at development across, whether if we're talking about specifically the downtown core, where in the end we wind up with a socially equitable development plan and strategy. It doesn't mean that every development has to have every type of housing in it, or that all development has to be affordable housing. It's really looking at how do we create a neighborhood where we have all of that in one form or another.
Okay, now if your petition should fail, say city council is not interested in this stuff, what do you see being the worst case scenario that happens to the city?
Well, I think we've seen, you know, gentrification type of development for many, many years in many parts of the country. And what you wind up is with boom and bust. You wind up with a few very affluent areas, and then you have other areas of the city that wind up being ghettos. And then, you know, things go up and then they bust. And we can see that in many respects when we look at downtown in Reno. I think if we do this smartly at the front end, we can avoid many of the problems that have happened in the past. So, you know, I think that the city council is made up of good people who want to do good things for the city. And I think they have an opportunity to take social equity, say it's a core value, and then begin to craft a development strategy around that and seek out partners who want to do that type of work and be real partners with the people of the city of Reno.
Okay, well, we've got about a minute and a half left at this point. So what would your message be to the public to get involved or get more information about all this? What do you want them to know?
Well, they can visit our website, action.org. We'd really like people to get involved and really particularly the people who have been historically marginalized and disenfranchised. One of the things that Action has as one of our core values is not just to work on issues, but to develop grassroots leadership. It's why we've been going out to the weeklies to organize the veterans, the disabled, the elderly, the working families, the children that are living in these conditions, to say, now's the time to get involved so your voices are being heard, so you're at the tables where the decisions are being made, where the issues are being discussed, so that way the people who make these decisions on our behalf can actually hear from the people who are the most affected by them. So visit us at action.org. We want you to get involved, and it's to your benefit and advantage to do that.
Okay, Mike, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, well, coming up on Face the State, we will hear from the city of Reno about the policies already in place and plans in the works to manage all of this growth and the housing shortage. Stay with us.